So, Blake, you ran for the Senate. You did not win. What's different about your election? How did it go? You know, what was your experience?
The margin is different. You know, I think I lost by about 125,000 votes was the official difference between Mark Kelly and me. And, you know, I think I drew a tougher opponent, and he's an astronaut, and man, he nuked me with like $30 or $40 million, right? And you know, we thought about suing, and was this the right thing to do? And ultimately, with all our analysis, like, no, it wasn't, because as messed up as this election in Maricopa was, you can't make up 125,000 votes. Like, I don't think I won the election, right? And I have to have enough integrity to say that. I can't sell false hope to my people. Like I said, Abe Hamadeh, 500 votes. This stuff in Maricopa County absolutely swung 500 votes. Now, Kerry has the interesting in between, right? 17,000, and I guess that's what her trial was, and she's trying to prove that but for this incompetence, call it incompetence at best, malfeasance at worst, but for this incompetence, I would have won 17,000 votes. We'll see.
Let's hammer that one down. Let's say that Kerry Lake's initial argument was, I understand that it was one big misunderstanding by everybody. Nobody intended to do this improperly, but clearly we can see that the vote margin could be different if not for all these tabulators being wrong. The law could not remedy that.
That's right.
The law requires intent.
It requires intent, and could be different. It was different. It would have been different. And that's a really hard bar. It's a really hard bar.
Also, but that's insane. That's not real governance. Real governance is saying, okay, what do we know? And let's apply remedy on the facts. They're saying, regardless of the facts, there's a high standard that must be met, meaning the system in place right now would actually put a person in power who didn't win, I'm saying hypothetically, just because the standard is too high to change it.
I think it's insane, because if I were to do something like destroy someone's property, but I didn't do it to hurt them, that wasn't my intention. My intention was just like, oh, I didn't have an intention. I just accidentally destroyed your house, but I didn't intend to hurt you.
No crime.
Yeah, apparently when it comes to you apply that to the political landscape, it's not a crime. That makes no sense. I mean, intention is irrelevant when you're talking about disrupting and destroying things.
Well, like if you kill someone,
you're right, somewhat.
If somebody dies and there's no intent, it's manslaughter. It's like if you're reckless or whatever. If you intend to do it, now it's murder.
But it's still a crime. It is still a crime.
So potentially, you could be driving in your car and you could hit somebody, and it could be totally accidental, and you don't go to jail for it. So the difference here is, that person still lost their life. We still acknowledge they lost their life. You may be still held liable civilly. We're talking about an end process where one person will be the executive in government, meaning there is a very simple remedy. If we can see that something lacks integrity in the election, we hold a new election, because we're trying to get the will of the people done right.
And Kerry Lake's opponent, Katie Hobbs, was her Secretary of State of Arizona during the election, her own election.
Which I think even California has a law that bans that, right? You shouldn't be able to oversee an election that you yourself are running in. That's just, even if you didn't do anything wrong, that's just the appearance of impropriety, which is corrosive to our politics. So obviously Katie Hobbs never should have been allowed to be Secretary of State and preside over this election. Obviously.
The Republicans should have spoken out more about Brian Kemp in Georgia for a similar reason.
Well, it's also important to note that I think the Republicans were very divided this upcoming midterm election. We saw a lot of money that was sent in many different places, and I think very surprisingly, it was a lot of Democratic super PACs that were supporting a lot of the Trump-backed candidates. But there's also an article here by Political that's describing how Trump was splitting donations with you, Blake, 99-1. Was that the truth? Because you were well overspent, because your opponent spent way more money than you. Can you just quickly tell us how much your opponent spent and how much you spent on this upcoming midterm election?
Yep.
And where was their resistance? Because it seemed like a lot of old Republicans didn't want to give you money.
I have to correct that a little. It's a misleading headline.
Got it.
It's true insofar as it goes, but actually, you know, on that list share, President Trump was sending out emails saying, donate to Blake on my behalf. We were getting those emails. It was helping me grow my email list. So the benefit wasn't financial in the immediate term so much as that long-term list building, right? He rarely does that for candidates. So it was actually a big net benefit to me. The press sees that and they're like, oh, Trump is screwing Blake. No, that wasn't true.
So when someone donated $100, he got 99, you got $1, but you also got the emails from that.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's a common practice, but the media was just looking to be unfair to Trump on that.
But so are you saying that the emails he was sending out was intended to fundraise for himself, but he included you on it? Or was it intended to fundraise for you and he took the lion's share, but it still benefited you?
More the former. And you'd have to look at the exact email copy or whatever, but like it was a common practice and they seize on it, right? And then so it's like, is that headline accurate? Technically, but it's misleading by lack of context.
The journalists pounced.
They pounced. But
your opponent spent
definitely
so much
true-
more money than you did.
Oh man, a lot. So I worked my tail off, right? And I raised $10 million, which is hard to do when the limits are $5,800. We're raising money, phone calls, a couple $100 at a time, a couple $1,000 at a time, adds up to $10 million. Mark Kelly raised about $70 million hard dollars. So it was about 7-1. That's on the hard dollar side. And that's the...
And a lot of it came from McConnell and the GOP establishment, I'd imagine, huh? I'm half kidding, by the way.
I don't think they definitely didn't help me, but they they sat out. They didn't help. Mark
What's your
Kelly.
response to the story of Democratic super PACs financing a lot of the more populist candidates, a lot of the more Trump-backed candidates this midterm election? Because this was one of their strategies, and some people are saying it actually worked in their favor. And there was major Democratic organizations donating to those specific individuals.
Yeah, I'm not sure that happened in Arizona. People thought that was happening. I've heard that alleged. I haven't really seen it with my own eyes.
We saw it, I think, in Maryland.
And in New Hampshire as well.
And it was like explicit and overt.
Just because they wanted to run against Baldock or something.
Exactly. Yep. They thought it would be easier to get moderates if they pushed someone that was more conservative or further right.
What'd you spend the $10 million on? Is that public?
I think it's public. Yeah, mostly. Mostly. TV staff. Obviously, you got to cover your costs, and mostly we had volunteer door knockers, and it was a grassroots lean operation. But staff, and then mostly TV and advertising. Right, TV, radio, digital. You got to get the message out.
Did you advertise on social media?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What did Mark spend $70 million on? Same stuff?
TV. He nuked. Yeah, just so August and September. As soon as I won the primary, I won the primary August 2nd, win by 12 points, wasn't particularly close. Wow. August 3rd, the Democrat spigot just turns on, right? And every third commercial is just, Blake Masters is a monster. Mark Kelly is this great guy. Blake Masters is a monster.
Where it shows you in black and white and the music.
Exactly. All these.
Red,
I know we're tempted to think like this stuff doesn't work, right? People can see through it, and it's like, well, if you go 4 months and you deploy like $50 million against somebody telling people that they're a monster, they might actually believe it on the margin, right? Which
what I want to do?
We were unable to overcome.
I would love to run a commercial. Like, it's too late now, but maybe I'll consider this in the future, where it's just like one of those campaign ads where it's black and white, and it'll be like, Mark Kelly went to outer space. How do we know an alien didn't replace him? And then like,
did he go to
Blake
space?
Masters is a Boy Scout who helps a church, and then
that's basically the formula, and it's cut and paste, and you do that enough, and the ballot harvesting, right? And then they go together. Right, because I think people who are really paying attention, people who have a political opinion, they're not going to be, I think, sold by those ads. But if someone just has in their subconscious while they're trying to watch some entertainment, right, Blake Masters is this horrible guy because I've seen it 36 times in the last 2 weeks, then someone knocks on the door and says, hey, have you filled out that ballot yet? No, I haven't. I might not. Oh, no. Hey, have you heard Blake? And all of a sudden, there's a vote in this system by a low propensity voter.
I just want to ask you,
advertising is quite effective.
I just want to ask you one question, just going along with this conversation. What did you learn from this election, and what would you be doing differently if you could go back and change anything?
Going back, I think we'd have to focus more on early voting. Right, harvesting is technically illegal, but there's nothing illegal about tracking ballots and actually raising money to go. It's almost a bigger project than one campaign could do, but certainly as a party, we need to get better at understanding. We got to be banking votes early. I think Carrie Lake and I, we were working hard. We would fill gymnasiums, 500 people, 1,000 people, night after night. We were winning hearts and minds. We had the enthusiasm. We were chasing votes, and the Dems had turned it into a mathematical ballot chasing operation and invested very, very early. And as soon as voting opened up in October, I think they were able to open up a lead. And so we got to get much more quantitative and mathematical about it early on.
So our reporter Shane Cashman, he's covering the Carrie Lake trial right now very heavily. He had to sit down with Carrie Lake, but he also got to sit down with Ye, Kanye West, and he told me, he's like, hey man, Ye's taking ballot harvesting really, really seriously. And I was like, that's the one thing I told him. And I told him before the show started, he asked me, how do I become president? I was like, he asked me 3 times and he kept getting mad that I wasn't answering him. And I was like, because I'm not a political consultant, but I was like, okay, fine, ballot harvesting. And he was like, what's that? And I was like, knock on doors, tell people to fill out the ballot, have someone fill out the form to properly return the ballot for them. Then it doesn't matter what message you have. You don't need to go to anybody and say, here's what I'm going to do. All that matters is you knock on their door and say, just fill it out, who cares? And they'll do it. And I'm like, especially if you're Kanye West, you're not going to say Trump, Biden, Kanye West. People are going to say Kanye West, celebrity.
So some states ballot harvesting is legal, some it's not.
In 39 states, it's illegal.
And it's not in Arizona?
It's not technical. It's illegal in Arizona, but here's what is legal, right? You can if you have $15 million, and the Dems do this, and Republicans didn't, right? To our great detriment. But if you have $15 million, you hire 1,000 people, you assign each person, here's 500 ballots, right? People, their names. And you can go to their door and knock, hey, have you voted? We know you got a mail-in ballot. And that person probably wouldn't have turned it in, but you can just keep bothering them, keep showing up, be polite, but show up at the door. Hey, have you voted? No. Hey, you want me to stop coming to your door? Vote right now. Open it up. Let me walk you to your mailbox. That's legal.
Right.
What you can't do is just collect it physically and then turn it in by yourself.
And so this is every state. In 39 states, you can actually knock on the door and be like, I'll take it for you. There's just, I think it's 12 states have certain stipulations, like you have to sign a form as a caregiver or something. But there are many states where you're allowed to knock on the door and be like, I'll take that right for you to the mailbox. And then you end up seeing people coming in and dropping off tons of ballots. But I'll simplify it for you. Someone knocks on the door in a city and they say, hey, I see you got your mail-in ballot. And they go, yeah. And he goes, why don't you fill it out? And they go, all right, I guess. Who am I voting for? Just Democrat. Okay. And then what do I do now? Just drop it back in the mailbox right there at the front of your door, and the mailman will come take it. And they go, okay.
You're allowed to tell them to vote Democrat?
Mm-hmm. These people are not politicians who are going to knock on your door. These are activist nonprofits who are just being like, as a regular old person, here's what you should do.
That sounds like the government telling Twitter to censor for them. Like if just because they're not politicians, they're hired by politicians to do it.
I disagree. Look, if I'm a regular person and I knock on someone's door and say, I want you to vote for Blake Masters, that's just me as an individual.
But if you've been hired by the Masters campaign to do it, it's different.
That's very, very different. But these are nonprofits. These are not the candidates necessarily doing it. To a certain degree, they probably do it to the legal extent they can. But what ends up happening is, I think one thing I want to stress is that a lot of Republicans didn't understand how Biden could have gotten so many votes. They didn't understand this going into 2022 even. And so we end up seeing what should have been a red wave come in substantially less. But it's not so much that the votes didn't come in, it's that Democrats got a ton of votes through ballot harvesting and grassroots efforts, which is totally above board and legal, except because of universal mail-in voting laws and because of absentee voter lists, which persist after the first time you sign up. It makes it extremely easy for urban centers to get out the vote and very difficult for rural voters. You were mentioning that the rural vote didn't turn out. Is that what happened?
Not how we needed it to in Arizona. Yeah.
So think about you driving out to a rural area where every house is a football field away from each other. You knock on the door, you wait a few minutes, then you get in your car, you drive down the football field, you park, you get out, you knock on the door, you wait a few minutes, someone answers, they say, sorry, I'm not interested, you get in your car. In a major urban center where you've got one big housing unit with 100 apartments, you knock on the door, no answer, you turn around physically and knock on a door and you get an answer. A major advantage to Democrats because they tend to be living in urban areas.
Like you could argue it's like 1,300% more effective or like 1,700% more effective because the amount of time it takes in a apartment complex to go to like 190 people, it takes you probably get to like 7 houses in the country or like 12 houses in the country. Which
exactly.
Is like a 14-to-1 ratio. That's a lot of time. And gas money. Man.
And, we got to be self-critical. Some of this was self-inflicted. Like Republicans, we're very into voting in person on Election Day this cycle, right? The good old-fashioned way. And I'm sympathetic to that. I think more people should vote on Election Day. Like that seems like a good thing to do, right? This crazy extension of mail-in voting that we saw in COVID. So and what's the left-wing wish list? Is just automatic voter registration. Let's mail a ballot to everybody.
16-year-old voters.
16-year-old voters. Pretty soon they'll say well, let's just presume that you voted the same way that you did last time, and that you have to opt out. Look for that to be on the discourse in the next 5 years. But as long as we have this mail-in voting regime, we need to use it. We can't just say, hey, don't let the Dems bank votes and then we'll all show up on Election Day. Well, on Election Day, the printers might not work, right? And you can't leave yourself in this vulnerable position.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.